Solar Opposites looks just like Rick and Morty. Solar Opposites sounds just like Rick and Morty.
Luckily, I'm a genius and suspected you were incapable of handling this, so I made a little card with important pupa information on it. I have it in my wallet.
There are even times when Solar Opposites feels just like Rick and Morty.
It's the suit, not me! It's the suit! The suit's on autopilot!
It is no surprise and no secret that Solar Opposites has a lot of similarities to Rick and Morty. Terry is basically just an equally dumb but less pathetic Jerry. Corvo is like Rick minus the alcoholism and depression. These similarities come from the fact that many of the same people who worked on Rick and Morty also work on Solar Opposites. And one of the other aspects that is shared between the two shows is their multi-plot structure. Very often, Rick and Morty's episodes would follow the two titular characters on a chosen adventure. Then, at intervals, the focus would switch to one or all of the supporting characters and their adventures. These are the two plot lines within almost every Rick and Morty episode, the A plot and the B plot. And if you are wondering how or why a narrative would benefit from a multi-plot structure, the iconic Every Frame a Painting has a great video on it. Here is a section that might help you understand.
The second rule in this movie is to have more than one story moving in parallel.
I'll quote Hitchcock again. He said the name of making movies is Meanwhile Back at the Ranch. He's absolutely right. You want to have two things going. You reach the peak of one, you go to the other.
I hope you know what you're doing.
You pick the other up just where you want it. When it loses interest, drop it. Meanwhile, back at the ranch.
Multi-plot structure is meant to keep the pace of the narrative continuously moving forward. Every time that you might encounter a lull, you simply switch to the narrative running in the background. For all of you readers and writers out there, this is extremely similar to books with multiple POVs. Once you get to the end of one chapter focusing on a character, you start the next chapter and switch to another character to keep the momentum going. Solar Opposites, like Rick and Morty, keeps with this handy narrative tool. Throughout each of the episodes, we follow Corvo and Terry. When that journey reaches a peak, we go to Jesse and Yumulak. These are the A and B plots respectively. However, that isn't the end of it. Solar Opposites has a C plot, and one that is so markedly different from everything that surrounds it that you can't help but pay close attention to it. Of course, I'm talking about The Wall. Watching the first few episodes, you might have totally disregarded the replicants shrinking down people as a throwaway gag. In fact, when The Wall is introduced, it's only for about 15 seconds at the end of episode 1. The Wall actually starts as a part of the B plot, focused on Jesse and Yumulak. At the beginning of episode 2, The Wall is shown again, but still from its perspective of its relation to the replicants' B plot. It's only at the end of episode 2 where the perspective shifts from The Wall in relation to Jesse and Yumulak to The Wall standing on its own. Even still, we as the audience are only given a brief glimpse, just around 60 seconds. But that sets the stage for what's to come later. Episodes 3, 4, 5, and 6 make up the mid part of the season, but those episodes are in no way equitable in how they show plot lines. The A and B plots appear across all 4 episodes. The C plot, however, only gets showcased in episodes 3 and 5, and they have the most screen time for The Wall so far. Episode 3 contains 6 minutes of the C plot, and episode 5, 3 minutes. Now, some of you might be surprised at those numbers. If you were like me, you felt that there was much more time devoted to The Wall by this point in the season. But no, as of episode 6, there had only been 10 minutes to develop The Wall as the C plot. The reason that it felt so much grander and lengthy is because of the amount of information that the creative team was able to seamlessly cram in. They set up the characters, the premise, conflicts, betrayals, and the world building of religion, economics, and feudal power dynamics. Those 10 minutes interspersed between 4 episodes established its setting better than some movies do in 2 hours. And of course, this all leads to episode 7, where the entire multi-plot structure turns on its head. Within, The Wall becomes the focus of the episode, essentially the A plot, and everything happening with Corvo, Terry, and the Stolen Bear happens quite literally in the background. Episode 7 was the last we saw of the Wall plotline in Season 1, and it gave us what I considered to be a fantastic episode with genuine comedy.
You remember in the cell when we would turn our backs to jerk off? I would think about you when I did it.
That's nice.
And drama all the way through. And what makes things even more impressive is that if you exclude the credits and openings, there is effectively 160 minutes of runtime across the 8 episodes of Season 1. Everything having to do with the Wall's C-plot happened in just 30 minutes, the majority of which came in the penultimate episode. And honest to God, as weird as it sounds, the C-plot was the best part of the show for me. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the wacky hijinks of Corvo, Terry, and the replicants. There were some genuine laugh-out-loud moments and some crazy circumstances, but for whatever reason, that side of the show never really clicked with me in the way that I thought it would. And on a certain level, that's my fault. I am sure some, if not all, of my disconnect from the A and B plots of the show can be attributed to my subconscious mind wanting Solar Opposites to be a continuation of Rick and Morty, which frankly, it just plain isn't. Creators Justin Roiland and Mike McMahon have addressed this topic directly. They have said, "I think by default, the characters are so different than Rick, and Rick really is the centerpiece of Rick and Morty. He's driving everything and the world kind of revolves around him, and he's a pretty tortured, dark individual with all kinds of unknown things about him. And on our show, we've got 4 aliens that are, for the most part, pretty naive. They're certainly naive to human affairs, and that opens the door to a lot of fun stuff and jokes. It's sort of an immigrant story with these aliens on Earth. I think that, in and of itself, really differentiates the show. It makes it a bit lighter. It's just sillier." Mike McMahon then contributed, "It's dark sometimes, but only because we're chasing joy all the time on it. That's the true guiding light." I think the two men hit the nail right on the head. There is a distinct difference in thematic tone between what Rick does and between what the 4 aliens of Solar Opposites do. Where Corvo, Terry, Yumulak, and Jesse anchor a story of comedic wackiness containing hints of bleakness, Rick and Morty is more of a story of comedic bleakness containing streaks of wackiness.
Shit on the floor.
Rick and Morty is a show that doesn't shy away from the dark, consequential side of what comedy can offer, and that is one of the reasons that I love the show. And I believe that it's also one of the reasons that I love Solar Opposites' C-plot so much. The Wall is much more similar to Rick and Morty in tone than it is to the rest of Solar Opposites. The happy-go-lucky, largely inconsequential skylarking of the aliens is in pretty stark contrast to the serious life and death endeavors of the Wall plotline, and the latter is the type of thing that truly grabs my interest. I love seeing the consistent build-up and evolution of complex characters in a unique setting, trying to overcome dire conflicts spearheaded by a threatening antagonist. And I don't think I'm alone in that either. The Wall, in form and fashion, is extremely similar to the evil Morty subplot. Both were introduced at the end of an early episode and initially took a back seat to the main goings-on of the cast, but were eventually given their own completely dedicated episode to flesh out their conflicts. Both depicted underdog characters fighting against a ruling class in an isolated society, and both ended with a revolutionary leader revealing their dark nature once they had taken power. We fans of Rick and Morty had no idea what the Ricklantis mix-up had in store for us, mainly because of the misleading description and title, but it went on to tell us an engaging narrative that had been going on behind the scenes, and now stands as the highest rated episode of the whole series. Likewise, Solar Opposites Episode 7, Terry and Corvo Steal a Bear, has a completely unrelated title and description, but because of its deep dive into a narrative that had been brewing in the background, I consider it to be the best episode of Season 1 by far. And as much as I felt the A and B plot of Solar Opposites were just okay, I think the show couldn't have been planned to come out at a better time. Rick and Morty Season 4 Episode 6, Never Ricking Morty, was a pretty clear statement that the creative team behind the show no longer wants to go down the path of serialization. For those unfamiliar with the term, serialization is when a show has connective pieces from episode to episode, where parts of the narrative are shared and built up across the seasons. This is very typical for dramas that have continuously rising stakes. On the flip side, you have episodic television, where each episode is largely self-contained and does not impact the previous or subsequent episodes. Rick and Morty started very blatantly as episodic animation, but slowly moved into a more serialized format, culminating with Tales from the Citadel. Never Rick and Morty and all the things that happen on the story train are an acknowledgement of the narrative opportunities that serialization could bring.
Is any of this canon?
It could have been.
But also a repudiation of them.
Yeah, you're right, Morty. We got all that meta canon shit out of the way, and now we can just be ourselves.
Rick and Morty very well might have stone cold dropped its serialized C-plot concerning Evil Morty and Bird Person and the Citadel to go back to the show's roots of just being episodic adventures without the rigors of strict storylines. Of course, that also means dropping the most beloved part of the show, that consistent conflict-packed plotline that had been building for years. But that's why I think Solar Opposites has a perfectly timed release. Where Rick and Morty just killed their consistent serialized plotline, Solar Opposites was written with one in mind. When an interviewer brought up to co-creator Mike McMahon that the Wall plotline created a serialized connected feel for the show, he said, "That was a big selling point of us when we went to pitch it at Hulu. We knew we wanted to build in a serialized aspect of the show, and we had already broke it out all in advance of pitching it. It was a big reason to do a show that wasn't like shows we had worked on before." The C-plot of The Wall entertained me and so many others because it captured the same feeling as the Evil Morty plotline. The benefit though is that The Wall is around to stay. Solar Opposites is really touching the best of both worlds. It can continue to have the light, crazy, out-of-nowhere episodic adventures that makes adult animation so enthralling for some, while also having a consistent, engaging, drama-packed plotline that draws in others. I know that many people came into Solar Opposites thinking it was just a reskin of Rick and Morty, but I think both shows are heading in their own unique directions, and I can't wait to see where those diverging paths lead. Anyway, thanks for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed what you heard, like, comment, and subscribe, or you can support the channel on Patreon to gain access to some awesome perks. As always, it was a pleasure, and I will talk to you all again soon.